Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, I want to have an in-depth look into the global modifier of this season. Year 6, Season 3 brings us a Rogue Momentum as our modifier. And of course, this will be the main modifier we'll be using for this entirety of the season. There is, of course, a complete new set of the main one, and then also actives and passives to go with it. So we'll have to delve into it. One of the things that is directly noticeable is it isn't as powerful as last season's, especially in the passives. Most of the power of this season's modifier is coming from the main modifier itself and not so much from the passives. The passives actually don't add in that much, but that actually creates lots of opportunities as they have taken to make some CC and such available to us through the modifiers, and that's actually pretty cool. And together with that, the main modifier of the season does allow us to have increased movement speed as we go through its tiers and gain more momentum. That way we can zoom around, and I've been quite enjoying that. But yeah, let's go and delve deep into this. And Rogue Momentum is Year 6, Season 3's global modifier. As with all global modifiers, we have the option to turn it on and off and alter its settings by going into this menu item in the inventory at the top. Once we go into there, we can go and activate or deactivate it with this toggle. We can do so actually without a loading screen at all. Keep in mind that you can only have either a global event or the global modifier on. If you toggle the global modifier on, it will turn off any global events, and turning any global events on will turn off the global modifier. In this menu as well, we can pick our active and our passives and look through even the global modifier itself, and also the hostile modifiers are listed by going into this menu. And with Rogue Momentum turned on, we see that there is now a bar next to our ammo on the left of it there. That is the bar that signifies how far into momentum that we are, as it is basically a stacking buff that is on kill. And then also we can do certain things to get it due to our modifiers. So for instance, if we have a passive modifier that gives us, due to crits, gives us a little bit of momentum, we'll gain some of that. And of course, a lot of the passives do have things to make extra momentum happen. Whenever we get a kill, we get a certain amount depending on their veterancy. So reds give less than elites, give less than named enemies. Then also we have this mechanic of blacklisted enemies that are marked with that icon above their heads. If they shoot you, they drain you more than other enemies. All enemies shooting you will drain you a little bit of momentum, but blacklisted enemies can drain you actually quite fast. But also if you kill them, you gain an increased amount due to them being blacklist enemies. And that will fill up your bar much faster than just normal enemies. And we can also make blacklisted enemies happen due to some of the modifiers, as we'll look into in a second. Then as well, we have actives as always. And for instance, here with Overdrive, if I trigger it, which on PC is T, on consoles is the D-pad up, whatever button it is set to go rogue in the DZ, it's the same button. Nowadays as well, we don't need to ADS anymore like we did with previous seasons, but triggering, for instance, Overdrive here, we are at max momentum right away. Although this is this modifier, as we'll discuss in a second, it's kind of like taking a loan. We get an upfront increase, and we get going with our momentum, but then we have to kind of pay it back as we have a reduced amount after it is active. And once it is active as well, as you'll notice here, I am moving around a little faster than I normally would, and I have also other bonuses. Let's start out with that main modifier, the global modifier, Rogue Momentum. And as we talked about, it builds by eliminating enemies and also doing anything that would normally, for instance, give accolades like multi-kills, headshots, skill kills, and tactical kills, which is basically weak point kills. For any of those, you gain more. As you go through the gear, you gain escalating bonuses, as it says here. And also, it is important to know that actually running around, as the decay over time is temporarily slowed when you sprint or use pulse. Whenever you're sprinting around, and that this is actually an active tactic that you can use if you're waiting for teammates, for instance, to catch up to you at a door or something while you're running around in a mission, you can actually just run in circles, and that will actually decrease the the decay a little bit. It doesn't stop it anymore as it did in the PTS. Together with that, using Pulse will make it that it stops for 5 seconds. And yeah, we gain some escalating bonuses as we go through the tiers. It is 3 tiers of 25%. This 4th tier is from 76 to 95, so 20%. And that final 5% is this Unstoppable, which is our top tier here. Of note is that this weapon and skill damage is just all weapon damage and skill damage as it would be from stats. It is additive to those pools, so this isn't a full 5% increase. It is basically, depending on how much you have on your build, quite a lot less. So for instance, for a normal red build, this is a little bit over 2% if you're at 130 weapon damage, as full red strikers, for instance, would be. Then we also gain movement speed in these. That movement speed is caps at 20%, as we see here as well. On tier 4, it's 20% and doesn't go above that. That is also seems to be our cap for movement speed in general. You cannot use Lady Death or Acostas to exceed this. If you have both bonuses up, you still run at the same speed. So 20% seems to be our cap. What we gain as well is some reload speed, and that keeps going up and up as well, up to 20%, which is quite handy, of course, and will make it a lot more, you get to play a lot more aggressive because of that. Then we also start gaining some rate of fire. And in this rate of fire is actually from tier 3 onward. In there, that rate of fire is actually the big damage buff, as of course gaining 15%, 20%, and 25% here will increase your damage by quite a bit. Keep in mind though that, yeah, this rate of fire is also additive to rate of fire if you already have it, either on mods from the gun, or if you're running Striker, as a lot of us will be, of course. But that still is not a stat that we will have diminished to all hell like weapon damage normally would be. So this 20%, while for instance on Striker, not the full 25%, it is still a hefty bonus. And also what we gain in that final step, in that final 5%, whenever we are in that final chunk, we gain skill overcharge. And this is even if you're at a 0 tier skill, for instance, on a red build, your skills are overcharged at that moment. And of course, that can be very powerful if used correctly. Then as we discussed, we have these blacklisted enemies with that mark above their head. One thing as well is whenever you kill them, they actually provide bonus momentum as talked about, but they also provide weapon handling and crit chance, 10% of each. And this seems to be either 10 or 20 seconds. I haven't exactly timed it. Somebody will and will maybe add it in the comments. But it is for a decent amount of time. And yeah, we could even forego maybe a coyote and go with this crit chance from this, because blacklisted enemies, we can also make them appear. But then getting damaged by them, even if they are hitting just your shield, it will increase your decay. It will make it go faster for 5 seconds. And this is up to 15 times faster, depending on the tier that you're at. It drains you less the lower tier that you are. And let's start looking through the active modifiers, which we can pick from. You will have to unlock these through the journey. The main modifier is available from the start, but the actives and the passives will unlock as you go through the journey. We'll start here with Overdrive, which is I feel, the general use one. As we kind of discussed a second ago, this is like taking a loan and then you kind of have to pay it back, as this will instantly max out our rogue momentum, putting us into that final step. And we also gain some bonuses here listed as 30 weapon damage, 30 skill damage, and 30% rate of fire, which is really powerful, of course, and unlimited ammo supply. All of those are very powerful for 10 seconds, but then comes the cost, the penalties afterwards. After Overdrive ends, so that 10 seconds, we go into 150 seconds cooldown, which is also a very long cooldown. That's 2.5 minutes. Together with that, we get that momentum gains are reduced by 70% for that duration of that cooldown. Now, that is a hefty price to pay, but it isn't actually that big, especially if you have the right passives, as we will discuss in a second. Here, let's activate it. We'll get our bonuses from it. We have a lot of increased damage and such for 10 seconds, also maxing us out, of course. Those bonuses are on top of the bonuses we get from being in that final tier. So we do a lot of damage and we can actually kill very fast. Then, of course, we have to kind of pay it back. But actually, as you notice there, I am, for instance, running here one that where whenever I crit, I gain some momentum. With that, we can actually keep it up into that max for quite a bit, but we need to, of course, be on certain builds that can keep up the momentum pretty well. Then as well, on the buff bar, we see actually there is a cooldown indicator there. That icon that is filling up in red slowly, that is the cooldown of it. And that is quite handy, actually, that they've added that there. And we can see for how long it is on cooldown and see that it isn't when it is available again. And let's discuss the next one, Tactical Supremacy. This one, whenever we activate it, it increases all equipped passive modifier bonuses for a limited time. That is 100%, and that seems to be especially the percentages that we gain from it. Anything that is highlighted in orange in the passive modifiers seems to be doubled in this way. Whenever it is active, your momentum won't increase, but also won't decrease. It doesn't list that here, but it basically locks in your momentum at the step that you're at or whatever you are on. One of the penalties, as it lists here, is that if at Unstoppable Momentum tier, which is tier 5, the top one, the 95 to 100%, that will be cancelled on activation. What that basically means is that if you're in that final step, because that will be the cool step to lock in, right? You can't. If you're in that final step, it will actually put you at tier 4. Then, to get those modifier bonuses and stuff, and its duration is dependent on this, that we get, it is 15 seconds at a base. We should be able to just extend it by 25 seconds. That currently seems to be infinite at the time of making this video. That might get patched out later. But headshot kills at 2 seconds, skill kills get at 1 second, up to that extra maximum duration of 25 seconds extra on top of that 15, so 40 seconds max. And there's also a pretty short cooldown with 60 seconds. This cooldown goes into effect after it is used up. So if you extend it, you can't extend it past the point of its cooldown, basically. The cooldown always comes after. I already have a little bit of momentum saved up. Let's actually get that a little bit higher, of course. And this is especially the one to go for if you are using headshot builds like Hotshot here, for instance. Once I'm at this, let's say tier 4, as I am here, if I lock it in at this point by activating it, even though I'm not doing anything and I'm just standing still, normally this would drain, of course, at this point. We see that it doesn't drain. But also, yeah, if I kill any enemy, it doesn't actually make a dent into going higher. But as we're making headshot kills, and this, of course, also would work with Determined, for instance, it increases our duration. At the current time, it seems to be infinite. You can just keep going and going for the time being. That will likely get fixed in future patches, though, so do check the time on it. But this is the one for headhunters, especially. And once it runs out, it does the same thing. We see that icon there, and the Activate Tactical Supremacy is grayed out. We know it is available again if that icon isn't there, that cooldown isn't there, and also it will highlight again in bright text instead of grayed out text that it is available. And last but definitely not least, Vendetta. This marks multiple enemies for elimination, and then in certain ways. Using this means that it will mark enemies with either that they need to be killed with primary weapons, skills, or pistol. And doing so earns you some of these bonuses. And it's actually interesting that these aren't damage bonuses. This is bonus armor and damage reduction. Especially the 70% on a skill kill does look actually interesting. Now, of course, you have no control of which marks come up on the enemy. When you activate it, it randomly picks some enemies and randomly picks which ones they will have. It doesn't mark one of each, for instance. The penalties of eliminating an enemy without doing it in the right way, so if they're marked with pistol and you kill them with a skill or such, for every one of those, you actually lose 15% of your armor. This is only armor. This does not touch your health, so this can't down you or kill you the way that, for instance, Requital could, but it can eat up your armor quite fast if you're doing it wrong. And it's not only you as well, because this one is actually group-wide. Vendetta marks are visible and interactable to nearby players. Its bonuses and penalties can also apply to nearby players. Its penalties especially as well, because if it is marked on an enemy and somebody kills them with the wrong thing, they will take this hit on them. So this is pretty good in coordinated teams, but maybe don't use it in random teams if it seems that those players aren't aware of how this works and are just hurting themselves. They're just, you should be yelling at them to stop pinching themselves. As well, Vendetta will actually overwrite any blacklisted enemies. That is, of course, a good and a bad thing. We can't gain more from them, but also they can't hurt you as much. Especially this can be a way if you haven't named or something that is blacklisted, let's say, for instance, as well. Some of the legendary final bosses or something, if they can actually be blacklist, for instance, but they won't die for a little bit, you can actually remove the blacklist for them so they can't drain everybody around them quite fast. And the duration of it is 30 seconds, and then it goes into a 30 seconds cooldown. So this is a very fast acting one as well. Let's take it into the game actually, and I'll activate it here. We'll see some marks happen already. So that icon that is on the enemy that I'm aiming at there, that is the main primary weapon. Then there is also a pistol, if we have one, which we don't. That looks like a pistol. This one, though, that may not be too clear, this one is the skill kill one. So if we actually murder them with a skill, then we get that bonus. But also, indeed, if we kill them, for instance, here without, we take that hit and we take that damage. And let's quickly roll through the passives. The passives, of course, are the slots down here. We can pick up the tree. These also unlock from the journey track, so you do need to get them from there. They are no longer on the priority objectives. They will unlock gradually as you go through there. You won't have access to any starting out, but you will have the main global modifier starting out, and then you gain more and more of these. These are also, with the journey, account-wide whenever you unlock them. Same for the actives. We have a total of 12 of them. And you can pick up to 3 to equip of the ones that you have unlocked. And each of them gives bonuses in certain ways. No longer do we really have super powerful ones. In the last season, especially the passive modifiers were the big damage boosters with By the Teeth or Tapper or Liability even. We don't have anything that strong anymore in here, but we definitely have some pretty good ones. And especially there's a good spread for a lot of different builds. And going to this first row, we first have Aggressive Drone. This is a 50% damage increase to the Striker Drone. This is skill damage. This isn't this full 50%. It also reduces its duration by 40%. This can actually be very helpful in for making it work with Turk Drone builds if you're running those Turk Drone hybrids maybe. But even on a full red build, because keep in mind as well that we have some skill damage with the momentum. We also have that overcharge at max value. And of course, even on a red build, an overcharged drone, dealing also a little bit more because of this, and then also getting from the momentum a little bit more damage. This can actually do a lot of damage when you are in that top tier. Then we have critical momentum. Critical momentum is one of the main ways of actually gaining momentum, especially for red builds, DPS builds. We gain 40% of every critical, 40% critical hits have a 40% chance. So basically, we first have a 60% chance, if you're at 60% crit chance, 60% chance to crit. Then of that, 40% is an ability to get one momentum out of it. That means that it is 36% basically at 60% crit chance. That is 1 in 3 shots, especially with, for instance, let's say if you're at 900 RPM with a FAMAS, that's 15 shots a second, 5 momentum as long as you're, well, hitting enemies as well, of course. This is one of the main ways to keep up momentum, especially as well once you trigger overdrive and you have to kind of pay back the loan. This is very much a tool to do that. We also have here critical recovery, which got boosted quite a bit from PTS. It was 0.15%, now it's 0.5% per critical hit. This also doesn't care about how hard this critical hit is, it just heals you for this amount. So this can actually be good for tanky-ish build, but even for red builds, because here, for instance, I have drained my armor. We're gonna shoot at this enemy, and as you can see, I'm kind of gaining a little bit, of course. But what we have as well, things like overdrive can, of course, both get us the top tier with that rate of fire and even more rate of fire when we hit that overdrive. Now, actually, even with a FAMAS, and of course, we can have vectors, which are even faster. we can gain a decent amount of armor back, and that is actually pretty handy, and I kind of have a regen on hits as we go. And moving on to the second row, we start out here with Explosive Amp. This one is Seeker Mine, deal double damage to blacklisted enemies. This then as well, in coordination with Rogue Scan, as we'll talk about in a little bit, Rogue Scan can make blacklisted enemies happen by pulsing, by hitting them with any and all of the pulse ways. And that is actually one of the ways that this can be utilized is, for instance, with a Seeker Spam build, you can run Pulse and Seeker Mines, making blacklisted enemies happen, and then dealing double damage to them. And this double damage is just full-on double damage. And then Seeker Mines can be actually pretty powerful. Even the Cluster Seekers with this bonus, and especially, well, with if it is a blacklisted enemies, can even pretty consistently kill elite enemies in solo scaling. Then we have Explosive Expertise. This one is a reduction to cooldown of a skill. If you get any explosive skill kills, you get a cooldown reduction of 30% if you score a multi-kill. Now, this does happen quite consistently with explosive skills anyway. It does seem to be just one charge, so for the Mortar and for the Hive, it isn't that useful. But for instance, for an Explosive Sticky or a Seeker or such, it can actually be a good way to reduce their cooldowns. Then we have Fortified Shield. This one gets you, your base health of your shield is increased by 100%. And this just in effect means that whatever health your shield was on, it is doubled now. This, for instance, for tech tanks and such, can make their shields much more powerful because, of course, as well, when you're doing percentage healing on them if you're using an Artificer. This, even on a red build, can make the shield, well, double as chunky and much more usable. Although for a red build, it does compete with some of the other also great options that we have here. And we'll start with one of those on this third row. This is Microwave Coils, and this is up to 4 enemies affected by Pulse now receive Burn status effect. You gain 5% bonus momentum for every affected hostile. This is any Pulse, so even the Remote Pulse or the Recon Drone, and up to 4 enemies at one time can be affected in this way. So if more than or if 4 enemies are already burning and more spawn and you pulse again, you will not get more burns until the burns run out, basically. This is also only applicable, you can't, for instance, if you're continuously pulsing with a normal pulse, the pulse has to decay on the enemy. It is on the initial application of a pulse that it does it. If they're already pulsed and you repulse them, they will not actually catch on fire. But that can actually be used as well in conjunction with the Recon Drone, as the Recon Drone very shortly pulses enemies, and then if it loses line of sight or something, it then repulses, it loses the pulse very quickly and then repulses them. Same as well with the Linked Laser Pointer nowadays being 6 seconds, you can actually, if you're not targeted an enemy for a little bit, you can retarget them and it will, it has a chance of setting them on fire again. And every time you do it in that way, you can gain 5% bonus momentum. This, especially in conjunction with the Recon Drone, can be really powerful, but just with a pulse as well, as we have also another thing we can use with the pulse, is very potent. Then we go to Momentum Surge. This is basically the critical momentum, but then for skill builds. This, though, is on skill kills, because kills with skills, double momentum gain. Anything, including, for instance, getting multi-kills and such, that would get you momentum, all of that gain is doubled, which can be used quite effectively, for instance, in conjunction with Overdrive, where you're overcharged already as well, so you will be getting some kills, and this can be used to kind of keep yourself up in the same way as critical momentum can be used for red builds, this can be used for yellow builds. Then we have also Overclock Projector, and this is that the decoy skills, whenever it is destroyed or deactivated, and this means basically runs out of duration or you deconstruct it, it will blind up to 2 hostiles targeting it, and you will receive 5% bonus for each affected hostile. This is also a pretty long range at 40 meters, and of course the decoy is already a pretty good skill. If you're running it already, just run this with it. Whenever it gets destroyed or runs out of timer or you deconstruct it, it will blind generally up to 2 enemies. They do have to be targeting it, so it doesn't need to be... If there's one enemy alive, they're targeting you because your decoy is very far away or something, it will not affect them. But yeah, in general, in group settings or something, you can even toss out your decoy and just instantly deconstruct it and just try to get this blind. This blind is also just chance, because even having sometimes with 2 enemies nearby it, often it will blind both of them, but sometimes it actually doesn't blind one of them. This could also be down to them maybe not targeting it, or the game not considering them the targeted that way. And this bonus momentum gotten in that way is, of course, very handy as well. And let's go to the 4th and final row. We have reactive reinforcement starting here. And this is heals 5% of your maximum armor when your shield takes damage. So this is your own personal armor. Whenever, if it is depleted a little bit and anything hits your shield, you will gain a 5% heal. But the downside of it is this effect has a 10-second cooldown. So it would take quite a while to heal all the way up from empty armor to full. It would take basically 20 of these, which is 200 seconds. That would take quite a bit. But it is a little bit of heal on top. If you're, for instance, running a tech tank and you already have regen, this could be, for instance, one of the picks to go with. Same for as well for tanks and stuff, full-on tanks, even though we don't use those that much. If you are, this could be a way to kind of heal yourself up a little bit. Next, we have Reaper Scan. This is one of the powerful ones here as well. And this is that enemy scan with a pulse, any pulse again, including the recon and the link laser pointer. They have a 25% chance to receive the blacklist mark. That blacklist mark is that same mechanic. If they shoot you, actually, you drain quite faster, but actually killing blacklisted enemies gains you indeed a lot of momentum. So this can also be one of the good ways to make extra momentum happen, basically. And one of the main tools I'll be using this season, especially on red builds, together with the pulse. Then we have a rigged battery, which is similar to the overclocked projector we looked at a second ago, which was for the decoy. This one is for the drone, though. This is players' drones that are destroyed or dismantled, which means either run out of their timer or you deconstruct them manually. It will shock two nearby enemies. This seems to be the same 40 meters range, I think, as this overclocked projector, even though it does not list its range, annoyingly. And this one also seems to consistently be 2 nearby enemies, whereas the blind sometimes only does 1 enemy. For every enemy blind or shocked in this way, we also gain 5% bonus momentum. So this is also a good way to get a little bit of momentum from that, although a little bit. But in conjunction with some of the other ones, this can be very powerful. And let's actually look at that. Let's look at some combinations. And knowing them individually is all fine and dandy, of course, but the key thing to know is how to make basically combinations of these, of course. There are some that are obvious, and there are some that are less obvious, although let's spell out even the obvious ones just to be sure everybody got it. For instance, first off, we have an active to pick and then 3 passives. For the active, for instance, if we have this overdrive, which is, I feel, the general use one for this season, it does come with that penalty afterwards, of course, which we kind of have to deal with. So we should make our picks kind of go for that. And of course, as well, the main damage of this season is not coming from passives, as it was with last season with By the Teeth and such and Tapper. It's very much coming from that main momentum mechanic, as there isn't too much things in here that actually increase our damage, and definitely nothing that increases weapon damage that much. Because we do have things affecting the skills, like a Seeker or a Drone, but nothing affecting really our output outright. And then what I feel is one of the top picks generally is to have critical momentum in there, or momentum surge, critical momentum for red builds, crit-based red builds specifically. This will fill up your momentum the most and will consistently try to fill you up, or if you're hitting overdrive, keep you at that max. Then momentum surge can kind of do the same for skill builds. Then combo-wise, one of the general ones I think I will go for, and I would recommend this one as it works pretty well, is the doing both of the pulse ones. I found this very effective in PTS and also here now in the main game now that it's out. We are doing some CC with the pulse, and together with that, of course, we're also making blacklist enemies appear due to our pulse. Now, the blacklist enemies also have a downside if they hit you, but generally you can kill a bunch of them, and that is a really good way to get your momentum up. This combination really is handy because you make some the burns happen as well. Each of those also gets you some momentum, and then you have this to pair it up. Of course, if you're running any type of drone, but even if you're running it on a full red build as one of the things as well with the pulse is actually if when you're in that overcharged state, you're getting that damage bonus, that 15% damage bonus of an overcharged pulse, you're getting that, which is of course one of the ways to actually get a little bit of a damage boost to red builds as well. I feel that's why the pulse ones are really powerful. If you're solo, for instance, going with the drone is a good way as well, because you can have aggressive drone and then also together with this rigged battery, making it so that your drone does a little bit more. If you're in that overcharge, it actually does pretty decent damage, even as a red build. And then if it gets destroyed or you need to dismantle it because there's a big enemy that you kind of want to shock in some way, you can make that happen by deconstructing it. But also, if whenever your drone gets destroyed, you'll get that back. Keep in mind as well that we have this season we have Scaven skills. So you just need a few pickups. If you're very aggressive, you'll just pick up a few pickups. You can pop your drone quite fast just by doing that. Now, of course, for one of the builds, Seeker Spam, hardwired Seeker Spam, you could actually go with Pulse, because you could make blacklisted enemies appear by using Reaper Scan, and then kill those blacklisted enemies with the double damage of this explosive amp, making the Seekers do double damage. That can also, for instance, be a really good combo. Now we, of course, have also a few for the shield. We have 2 for the shield, fortified skills and reactive reinforcement. This, for instance, for tech tanks, or even if you're just using Regulus with a bulwark. This fortified, of course, just doubles that and makes the shield, even on a red build, much stronger. And for instance, for a tech tank, you'll be in overcharge quite often, which both makes the shield invulnerable for a little bit, and then also the Artificer is also overcharged on a tech tank and heals it for a lot more, and it also has double here. And then also, if you took some damage behind the shield, this will slowly fill you back up. But then also we have a critical recovery. This is really good for any red build anyway. You can go with a combination of critical momentum, critical recovery, and then if you're using a decoy, because a decoy is a very powerful tool anyway already, going just Revive Hive and a decoy, you can have a little bit of regen through this critical recovery. You can have the decoy go out, and while it is out, it will take some aggro away from you. If it gets destroyed, it will blind up to 2 enemies in a pretty big range, and you get some bonus momentum as well when that happens. So yeah, there's a bunch of good combinations to be made in here. Something for everyone, except I feel overall for Headhunter builds, they went out of their way to not give Determined a little bit of a boon. It is because we don't have good, like the way that for critical and for skills, we have a really good passives to make extra momentum happen. But even for those, you can have, of course, the Recon Drone together with Microwave Coils and Reaper Scan, making it a little bit easier to get up, and then also, of course, just CCing some enemies for you. Then as well, for that, you would likely go with Tactical Supremacy. I feel this is very much the one for Headhunter builds, especially Determined Headhunter builds. Vendetta is much more for hybrids. You need a way to consistently make those skill kills happen, but also you can make that happen with just a drone as we had. So for instance, if we're going Vendetta, maybe pick the aggressive drone plus the battery one, and use it in that way, even on a red build. And of course, that's kind of the theory crafting of this. We might actually revisit this in the future and maybe go exactly on builds, and maybe some, if I find any creative ones to use in certain ways, we'll revisit this and kind of go one by one. This critical recovery as well just shouldn't be ignored. It is actually a decent regen, and especially RPM wise, as we also gain RPM from the modifier, this can be very powerful. Especially as well, consider if you have a 5-stack Chatterbox, this can actually heal you up quite fast. And lastly, we'll have to discuss the hostile modifier. Enemies that are marked in this way, where they are glowing red, are frenzied. As you unlock them in through the journey, they'll have increased amounts will appear, and also their bonuses will increase. And as we can see here, they have this red glow on them that kind of highlights them. And you can kind of still as well see them somewhat through cover, so you can kind of see still where enemies are coming from if you pay attention, because they'll have a few frenzied enemies within them. These enemies are basically at spawn chosen to be frenzied. They don't become frenzied in the way that, for instance, Blacklist works, and they gain bonuses as they become so, and they should be treated with some respect. if we kind of actually go into the hostile modifiers in here, Frenzy enemies grow more aggressive and resilient, smashing your rising momentum. Frenzied enemies boast increased rate of fire, movement speed, and rapid armor / health regeneration. And yeah, higher season progression increases the number of frenzied enemies and the potency of their buffs. And this is basically as you unlock the journey and go through at chapter 3. Once you complete chapter 3, frenzied enemies will start appearing. They will have at first 20% rate of fire, 20% movement speed, and 5% per second armor and health regen. And this 5% of course means that in 20 seconds, if you were to leave them alone for 20 seconds, they would regen all of their health and armor. Then we have also that starting at chapter 4, they have the same 20% rate of fire, the same 20% movement speed, but now they have 7%. And at chapter 5 and onwards, and especially, of course, most of us will be at chapter 7 quite quickly through the season. Then they have 30% rate of fire, which hurts quite a lot. They have 30% movement speed, which means they'll be in a spot to hurt you a lot quite faster. And they have this 10% a second armor and health regen. And whenever especially a named or something is picked as a frenzied enemy, you have to respect this 10% armor and health regen. Because in 10 seconds, if you leave them alone for 10 seconds, they'll be back again at full health and armor. And this also means that while you are hurting them, if you're taking 3 seconds to kill them, that means they have 30% regen in that time. So you need to do 30% more damage. And this does actually hurt quite a bit. But of course, that is kind of also the point of this. There needs to be something to offset our increased damage and such for ourselves. And this is exactly that. This one, though, is just one upon the enemy. We don't need to do certain icons or such. It is a visual on the enemies. And any enemies that are marked in this way, you just have to treat them with respect, prioritize them. Also, don't just damage them a little bit and then leave them. Make sure that if you're going for one of them, to murder them all the way. If they're shooting at you, watch out for that 30% rate of fire increase, because it does hurt quite a bit. And to conclude this video, we went through the entirety of the modifiers of this season, of the passives, the actives, and the main one, and even the enemy ones. I've been very much enjoying this season, especially that movement speed feels really nice. So I've been enjoying zooming around. It is powerful. It is definitely not as powerful as last season's one, but that's also a good thing in my opinion. As last season with Point Blank, we had a lot more power, especially due to some of the passives. They seem to have learned their lesson from that and put a lot of the damage, especially into the main modifier, and the passives are just cherries on top. And they're pretty good cherries, honestly, because yeah, we have a lot of CC, we have some healing in there, which we didn't have last season. And especially that healing can be very nice for general use. Then together with that, we have a lot of ways of making Blacklist, for instance, appear, and especially gaining momentum quite fast. And making the right picks for the right moments, even though some of them I do feel outright, obvious to go with, as especially for a red build, I feel critical momentum is the go-to, and same for the momentum one for that generates momentum on skill kills is very good for skill kills, of course. And we'll likely revisit this as well in some form with builds, as we'll go through maybe some general builds and kind of what picks I go with them, especially, for instance, some of the weirder ones, like what do we pick on healers and such. Because for those, and especially headhunters and healers and stuff, there isn't obvious ones, but we could alter maybe those builds a little bit to make use of some of these. So we'll discuss that a little bit more as the season progresses. But this just as the basis, and maybe also to put some of the ideas into your head and make sure that all of the mechanics are kind of understood. As this season is very much just run and gun. You don't need to think too much about how you're doing it or to be in certain ranges. Just make kills happen, and as the season goes on, make sure to have some of the modifiers that especially can generate you some momentum, because that is the main mechanic of the season. We don't want to be per se in long range and then use the actives to bring by the teeth into the ranges that we want. It is much more about just making sure that we generate momentum and then we just have it, basically. So yeah, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to do any and all of the algorithm things down below. It does help out quite a bit, so I will do that. A little bit of shilling here. For future videos, we are going to go into that Umbra build showcase at some point, and also we'll definitely jump into going with that call for backup concept that I've been meaning to do for quite a long time, but we'll definitely get that done in March as it comes up. And also we'll look into some of the minor changes that they did that weren't actually listed in the patch notes, as there's quite a lot of them. That will likely be the next video. But yeah, thank you for joining me. I did hope you enjoyed this video, this in-depth look into the global modifiers. And as always, have a good night.